Hey guys, Adam Menner here, Varsity House Gym. So one of the main issues that I see from a lot of lifting, right, when you talk about the main lifts, they're not bad, right? I need overload, I need stress to be able to ensure that I'm getting adaptation to chase, again, more power, more strength that's gonna allow me to perform at a higher level. However, when you do too many activities, such as a bench press that's, again, bilateral, that's a squat that's bilateral, or a deadlift that's bilateral, over time, if I utilize those patterns, what's gonna end up happening is that I'm literally going to develop, the body takes the path of least resistance. And again, all that pressure and that compression that I'm experiencing, right, muscle and tendon and tissue will begin to develop around that joint orientation, right? And so with that, here are 5 separate principles that you can utilize to help alleviate some pain, to help you recover in between sessions better, but also to give your body, both from an upper body and lower body standpoint, more movement options that are gonna allow you to play your sport better or allow you to handle your daily tasks better. So we're gonna start here with the upper. So the first one is what's called a supinated press. Right, a lot of times most individuals have better external rotation than they do internal rotation. And why is that? Because sometimes people have an internally rotated shoulder, internally rotated clavicle, but naturally, as you can see, as I anteriorly rotate here, right, I have more expansion of my upper back. Because I have more expansion of my upper back, that allows me to externally rotate a little bit better, right? And we talk about a lot is how times if I have too much anterior pelvic tilt, a little bit of lordosis in my spine, that's gonna allow me to externally rotate better. But what I need to do is regain hip extension, because proximal stability leads to that distal mobility there. And so we're gonna work on an upper body exercise here. This is called a supinated press. So I'm gonna sit down on the bench, put my feet up, I'm gonna press straight through. What I'm looking to do though is I'm looking to get supination, right? And again, look at my shoulder. I'm not pulled back, right? I'm fully rounded, so my scapula and my rib cage have ability to move. I'm going to supinate. Again, this is to open up the ribs anteriorly, but also to open up my lats and my scapula. I'm gonna drive my elbow and my wrist down to my ribs and then back up to center. So I start internally rotated, so I'm pronated. I then supinate, pull back. Look how low I am, down, and then I press all the way back to center. This is called a feet elevated supine single arm dumbbell press. The second principle that we're looking to achieve here is what's called alternation, right? If my spine is my axis, I have my ribs and everything that forms along my spine. And these can get really tight when I press, overhead press, and do all of my rowing. So alternation is the body's ability to alternate over a fixed spine. So here's an example of an exercise we like to use. This is called the band row and reach. And again, you can use any type of resistance, both whether it's vertical or if it's horizontal. I'm gonna step back. As I'm holding the band, I want to depress my shoulders. I don't wanna be crouched up. I wanna relax. And now as I scoop my hip, because I'm trying to get hip extension, I want to row low. As I row low, my torso stays straight, but I'm reaching straight across. So you can see I'm rotating and I'm alternating, but the spine stays fixed. My spine is fixed as I reach and I row. And what's happening here is my ribs are able to move freely and glide along that spine. And then everything else begins to follow suit. This is called alternation. Now for the lower body, right, we want to ensure, I talk about a lot hip extension. Right, I'm trying to regain that hip extension because we know that that proximal stability leads to our distal mobility. So one of the first exercises that we like to do is just a standing hook plank. You're gonna grab a kettlebell just like this. I'm gonna hold the kettlebell by the ear, but I'm gonna scoop my elbows up underneath. This again pulls me forward, right? It compresses my diaphragm. And now if you look at my feet, I'm shoulders width apart. I'm going to scoop my hip up underneath me. I'm trying to pull my elbows down into, right, my lats. I'm trying to scoop my hip up so that my diaphragm is stacked on top of my hips. I'm gonna take 5 deep breaths. So once you take your 5 deep breaths, again, we're trying to close that diaphragm and that pelvis. That's just gonna give us more distal movement options. The third exercise is what's called the front foot elevated lunge, right? A lot of the times, a lot of the athletes and adults that we work with, right, they are a lot of in mid stance or they're in that late stance of the gait cycle. So if I'm walking, right, a lot of times they spend time on their toes as they push off, right, and that causes a whole chain of reactions in the body. Now, if I'm looking here for the front foot elevated, I'm gonna bring my right foot up, right, I'm gonna hold the kettlebell down, so the ear of the kettlebell is down. I'm gonna stack, but notice what I do with my hip. I'm going to shift my hip back. So one of the ways that we like to teach this is both feet on the mat. I'm gonna push my hip back under control. As I push my hip back, now I step back, right? I'm posteriorly shifting my hip, internal rotation here, and I'm trying to keep my shin vertical. So my shin is staying vertical as I descend and then back to center. I should be able to wiggle my toes and I can feel my hamstrings, my glutes, and my adductors. This is called a front foot elevated reverse lunge. The fifth principle, again, is a split stance of lower extremity hinge movements. So this is a typical RDL. We know how to do an RDL. This is called a Camperini RDL. So what I'm gonna do is I actually want my back foot elevated. So my back whole foot is on the mat. My front foot is in front here. And again, what I'm doing is I'm dissociating my pelvis, but I'm also recapturing internal rotation of my back leg. So I'm here, I'm making sure that my chest is squared, shifting my weight back onto that back leg. And again, I'm internally rotating. I'm using load to pull my hips back into position. I'm gonna exhale all of my air, shifting my hip back, and then I come back to center. This is a 2-point Camperini RDL. I'm also gonna feel it in my opposite hamstring, but the key principle is dissociation of the lower limb. I shift my hip back, and I shift back to center here. Guys, these are 5 principles that you can utilize in your warm-ups and also in your supplemental work to help alleviate pain that you get from your main movements.